Hi everyone and welcome to clip 2 for assessment 3, our sport development future e-portfolio and personal reflection. This video will provide some advice on how you might approach this assessment. Okay, so let's step through the two parts, starting with the e-portfolio itself. I know that we're all starting at different points when it comes to the e-portfolio. Some of you have done several of them throughout your degrees, and some have a central one that you've been updating since you started uni, and others of you, I think, still aren't very aware what is this e-portfolio word I keep using. Okay, so wherever you are, know that it's okay, and hopefully after this clip you'll feel a bit clearer around where you need to be. I will say that early in the trimester, when I was looking for resources to help you guys approach the e-portfolio, someone recommended an online module that the Griffith Career Service had put together, and I was a little bit apprehensive about suggesting a module. I have been through it myself. I can highly recommend it to everyone. I have referred to it a few times on Learning at Griffith now. What I would say is whether you've already got an e-portfolio up and running, it's worth having a look through the online module to help you refine it for this assessment. If you're starting from scratch, it's an awesome tool to help you work through. You might even decide to do a couple of activities each day, and before you know it, you'll have a fully functioning and hopefully really nicely polished off e-portfolio. So I just want to walk you through how you're going to find that online module. I'm going to pop out of here for a second. Let me set it up. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the way a way to find it. If you jump into your Assessment 3 folder, where I've put all the information on the assessment, scroll down, there's a section here I've been putting links into, briefing material, and it's this one here, so online module and resource for building and refining your e-portfolio. Click on this link here and I'm going to show you what pops up when we do. Okay, so it brings us into our Careers and Employment Service site, and if you scroll down here, there's actually some really great resources here too, so take some time and have a look through this, but for the purpose of what I'm showing you today, right down here towards the end, create an e-portfolio. We're going to click on this red icon here, and that takes us through to this, as I said, it's a pretty awesome resource. Okay, so it's got a few different things here you can work through. What's an e-portfolio, why build one, the process, and then a whole step-by-step, know yourself, collect artifacts, blah, blah, blah. All right, so either way, like I said, if you've already got an e-portfolio, if you're starting from scratch, I really recommend working through this. I think it will give you a great framework to be able to put together a really good basis for an e-portfolio. Okay, so back over here into my presentation, and a couple of points before we move on from the e-portfolio. I would say just remember it is about curating. It's a creative process, what you're putting together, and so you need to present things in a way that convinces your audience. It's not just about sticking random assignments online as artifacts and hoping for the best. Okay, you do need to provide commentary. You do need to really think about what you're trying to communicate and try and make sure that you're doing the best that you can to get that communication across. Okay, and the other part of it is, I guess, like any time that we're applying for a job, you know, the advice that people will give you around writing a resume, writing a cover letter, doing it, I guess, on a case-by-case scenario. It's never good to have the same thing that you put forward for every job. Okay, so with this as well, I would really try and be as authentic as you can. So I did have a question come through earlier about, so someone saying that they do have an existing e-portfolio and they're asking if they could use that but just include a sport section. That's really hard, and I do want this to be a worthwhile use of your time. So for those of you that have I guess, you know, other majors and sport is a secondary interest, you might think about it like that. Okay, but I would say if you genuinely want to get into a sport career, I would recommend that sport really comes through as a key theme in your whole e-portfolio. Okay, not just as a subsection. It needs to be something that comes across in everything, because if you put this out to, you know, your industry audience and they see sport development as one, you know, tab on a bigger website, all that does is spark questions. I guess, you know, obviously this person's involved in interested in a lot of other things. Why are they applying for a sport job? Okay, so really think through whatever you're putting together. Try and think through, or even ask your mates, ask your family, if you were this person and I was applying for a job with you, what would you think, and what would this make you, what would a first impression be about this? Okay, they're the kind of things you need to be thinking through as you're putting it together. And as I said, as part of that process, and comes back to the criteria I went through in the previous video, this is really, as you're creating your ePortfolio, it's as important decisions about what you're including as well as excluding certain things too. Okay, a couple of points then on the self-reflection. Okay, key things to be thinking about. Your ability to complete the self-reflection adequately will depend on the extent to which you have engaged with the ePortfolio activity. So if you haven't really put a whole lot of effort into the ePortfolio, it's going to be pretty hard to come back and do your self-reflection. Okay. The other part, I would definitely go back, have a look at feedback from assessment 1, whether that's the overall feedback video clip I put together, or the feedback that you were provided on individual pieces through the Mark Centre. Have a look at what's been said and make sure you incorporate this into the third assessment, the personal reflection. Okay, those things will be marked again, so just make sure that you've ticked off that you're doing those better this second time around. And thirdly, yes, this is a personal reflection, but it is an academic piece of writing. It is referenced. And I've said, similarly to what we did for the first reflection, we're going to have at minimum 3 academic journal articles, and certainly draw in other resources that we've looked at during T2. We've done a few different quizzes. You might have things that you've looked at through the media or in industry reports, whatever. Certainly bring them in, but I want to see at minimum 3 academic journal articles. Okay, I always get questions with assessments how to set things up. So on Learning at Griffith, I did suggest a few subheadings, and I've listed them here. They include an introduction. Remember, with our introductions, we are very specific to introduce what this reflection will look at. We don't need to have a whole history of employment in sport, for instance. Okay, so short, sharp, and to the point with your introductions. Your career aspirations, so that is really going to be led by you wherever it is that you think that you're going in your career. We want to see a little bit of articulation around that. Key attributes of my chosen career, that's where I spoke about in the previous video about making sure that you do a little bit of research. So that's looking through, job descriptions, doing some internet searching, even your academic journal articles might bring up a few things that outline what are some of the attributes of XYZ career, whatever it is, wherever you're going, what are the key things that successful people need to get into those positions. Okay. There's a section in there on current strengths and areas for development. You might even break that down into further subheadings. It's up to you. But I think I spoke about that in the previous video at length. So that really is going to be somewhere where you're looking at what the ePortfolio says, perhaps drawing on some research to look at what you need to develop on, or what you're doing quite well, and comparing and contrasting in that section. Okay, your plan for continued development. Again, I said in the previous video, this is going to require a little bit of research. I don't just want, okay, I'm not very good at this and I'll just work on it into the future. I want to see some specific, that you've gone and looked at how you could develop this, and suggesting some specific ideas for whether it's a volunteer internship, looking to work your way up through a community sport club or something like that. Maybe we're going and doing some short courses or some other professional development. I want to see some clear, specific, plans forward. You might even put in there some time frames, over the next 6 to 12 months, over the next 2 to 3 years, something like that. Your conclusion and summary, similarly from your previous assessments, this is not, you're not concluding this as in trying to prove a point through what you've written. It's really just summing up. So opposite to your introduction, the purpose of this was to do X, Y, and Z. We did this as we went through, and then these are some of the key things that came from it. Okay, and then in terms of your appendix, I've asked you to include a screenshot of your ePortfolio just as a reference point for us as we're marking it when we go through. Okay, so I just want to emphasize here that what I've listed is really just a guide. Okay, as you start writing, you might find better subheadings that fit what you're writing. That's okay. This is really just to give people a starting point for where they need to, focus their efforts and get going with things. Okay, I've popped another slide in here just to help you guys think about what you should be referencing. Okay, so just to reiterate, a personal reflection is about analysing yourself in relation to the world around you, okay, and that includes researching the sport development systems that we've looked at through the trimester, and careers as one part of that, okay. So what can you be referencing in your self-reflection? Think about anything that you looked at in Assessment 1 and Assessment 2 to substantiate areas that you've identified as strengths or areas for development in relation to your career aspirations. So as part of that, let me try and come up with an example for you. If you want to head into community sport and you have a passion and a keen interest to work in a space of inclusion and diversity, for instance, you looked at your own experiences as an athlete in the first assessment, and perhaps you found some of your experience, there was some exclusive, or I don't know, maybe you were subject to some discrimination or something like that. So you have that personal experience that you can draw on, and there will be somewhere that you can kind of incorporate that in your eportfolio and your personal reflection. The other part, you might have in your spotlight topic gone out and had a look at, okay, how can community sport clubs be more inclusive of people with disabilities? Okay, so you now have a research report that backs you up from that perspective, and you might have through that found, you know, some key criteria for successful coaches or club managers. Anything along those lines, they're the kind of things that you can pull into this personal reflection part. Okay, so really be thinking, you know, I guess think a little bit broadly. What have I looked at? What have I done? And how can I bring that into what I'm writing about? How can I bring that into, well, not just what I'm writing about, how can I bring it into my sport development future and part of my career plan? Because I guess one of the challenging things but really great things is, once you get a handle of it, is when you start to look back over what you've done, you can start to connect the dots that help you understand where you are now. Okay, so really encouraging you guys to, it is hard thinking, absolutely, reflections always are, so but trying to identify what are some of those kind of they might seem like loose ends at the moment, but what are some of those loose ends that I can tie together to really strengthen and discuss and understand who I am, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what can I develop on further going into this career path. And then look, the last point I've got there is around, you know, running a Google Scholar search for something like employability in sport development or in sport management. Okay, that brings me to the end of this second clip for assessment 3. 3 points I'm going to finish up with here. The first one, like I've said, I guess in all of my feedback on all previous assessments, make a start. Okay, the hardest thing always is to get started on these things. Use the online module. I think it's really great, and I really encourage you to go and have a look at it. And then also go back through some of those weekly exercises we've done in the workshops, revisit those and see if there's anything that's kind of interesting that can help you flesh things out a little bit further. All right. Secondly, approach the eportfolio as being useful beyond this assessment. Yes, it's for your assessment, but I also think that for you guys to have some kind of online presence, whether it's a Pebble Pad, whether it's whatever you choose, or whether you decide for this assessment you're going to update, populate and really trick up your LinkedIn profile, that's also great. Okay, but understand that it's not just useful for this assessment, it's actually going to be useful for your careers as you go out. And so to have this opportunity to focus on this, to be made to focus on it for your assessment, I think is quite neat. Okay, and then lastly, make sure that you address feedback from assessment 1. I do hope that as we've gone through this trimester that aspects of our writing have improved, particularly for our technical writing, you know, report and reflection writing, having really tight introductions, being really in-depth on a few different things and showing in your writing your critical analysis skills is really important. So please go back, have a look at the feedback that I've given you for assessment 1. I hope that I'm not giving the same feedback for assessment 3. All right, good luck guys. I really look forward to seeing what you come up with.